On a sweltering August morning in 1970, a 21-month-old girl vanished from her modest home in Fort Worth, Texas, leaving no trace behind. No witnesses came forward, no ransom note appeared, and no clues surfaced to explain her disappearance. For 52 long years, Melissa Highsmith's name lingered on faded missing child posters in dusty police files, and the unwavering prayers of a family that refused to let go, a haunting mystery that outlasted many of the detectives who inherited the case, seemingly destined to remain unsolved forever. Yet, when the truth finally broke through in 2022, it shattered every assumption about time, distance, and fate itself. Astonishingly, the child searched for across the nation had been living just miles away all along, concealed in plain sight, her true identity buried under a lie. Before we dive into this gripping tale minute by minute, hit that like button to show your support, drop your location in the comments to connect with us, and subscribe to Cold Case Desk to stay updated on the world's most perplexing unsolved cases and their breakthroughs. Summer 1970 in Fort Worth was relentless, the heat oppressive, pressing down on working-class neighborhoods where families hustled to make ends meet. Among them was 22-year-old Alta Apentenko, a determined single mother pouring everything into raising her toddler daughter, Melissa, on her own. Recently separated from Melissa's father, Jeffrey Highsmith, Alta juggled grueling double shifts as a waitress at a local diner, her modest earnings barely covering the bills. She shared a cramped apartment with a roommate, navigating the exhausting balance of work and motherhood. Reliable childcare was a luxury she couldn't afford, and with no family nearby to lean on, she faced a constant struggle to keep Melissa safe while keeping food on the table. In a desperate bid for help, Alta turned to a common practice of the era. She placed a small classified ad in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, seeking a trustworthy babysitter for weekday care. It was a routine request, one countless parents made in those days, hoping to find someone dependable to watch their child while they worked. She could never have imagined that this simple, hopeful act would ignite one of the longest-running missing child cases in American history, a saga that would span over half a century. A few days after the ad ran, Alta received a phone call from a woman introducing herself as Ruth Johnson. Her voice was soft, confident, and reassuring, claiming years of experience caring for young children. She painted a vivid picture of a welcoming home with a spacious backyard, an ideal setting for a curious toddler like Melissa. Her polite, professional demeanor put Alta at ease, offering a glimmer of relief in her chaotic life. They arranged to meet in person at the diner where Alta worked, a chance for her to size up this potential caregiver. But on the scheduled day, Ruth didn't show. Instead, she called with smooth apology, citing an unexpected conflict, but reaffirming her eagerness for the job. Her calm persistence and articulate manner quelled Alta's concerns. With her work schedule tightening and no other options in sight, Alta made a fateful decision that would haunt her for decades. She hired Ruth Johnson over the phone, without ever laying eyes on her. At the time, it seemed like a practical solution to an urgent problem, a small leap of faith to keep her life afloat. On the morning of August 23rd, 1970, Alta left for work at dawn, as was her routine. The plan was straightforward. Her roommate would hand Melissa over to the new babysitter later that morning. Around 9 a.m., a woman arrived at the Spanish Gate Apartments on East Seminary Drive, where Alta and Melissa lived. The roommate, trusting Alta's description of Ruth, noted the visitor's composed demeanor and meticulous appearance. But in the blistering Texas heat, soaring past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, the woman's attire was strikingly out of place. She wore long white gloves that stretched up her forearms, a tightly knotted scarf around her neck, and a large bonnet that obscured her hair and shaded much of her face. Her outfit was pristine, almost formal, as if she were dressed for a church service rather than a day of childcare. The roommate found it peculiar. Who wears layers in such heat? But the woman's gentle, confident manner softened any suspicion. Introducing herself as Ruth Johnson, she spoke with soothing tone, her movements deliberate and calm despite the oppressive weather. Trusting Alta's prior arrangement, the roommate overlooked the odd attire, assuming it was just an eccentricity. She handed Melissa over to the woman, along with a diaper bag packed with essentials, a bottle, fresh diapers, a change of clothes. The exchange was brief, lasting only a few minutes on the apartment's doorstep. The woman thanked the roommate politely, settled Melissa on her hip, and walked away, disappearing around a corner into the shimmering heat. That was the last time anyone from Melissa's family saw the toddler or the mysterious woman in white gloves. That evening, Alta returned home from her shift, expecting to find Melissa safe, perhaps playing or napping under the babysitter's care. Instead, she stepped into an eerily silent apartment. Melissa's crib was empty, her toys untouched, her bottles still full on the kitchen counter. At first, Alta clung to hope, thinking it was a simple misunderstanding. Perhaps the babysitter had taken Melissa for a walk or to her own home. But as minutes stretched into hours with no word, dread began to tighten its grip. Alta frantically called neighbors in the complex, asking if anyone had seen a woman with a small child or if the babysitter had mentioned an errand. No one had noticed anything unusual. By nightfall, her worst fears consumed her and panic set in. Around 8 p.m., Alta dialed the Fort Worth Police Department, her voice trembling as she reported her daughter missing. Officers arrived quickly, taking statement from Alta and her roommate, piecing together the day's events with growing alarm. The description of the babysitter, a well-dressed woman hiding her identity with gloves, a scarf, and a bonnet on a brutally hot day, raised immediate red flags. They searched local records for anyone named Ruth Johnson matching that profile, but found nothing. The roommate's account became their only lead. A soft-spoken woman, oddly overdressed, claiming to be Ruth. Investigators quickly recognized signs of a deliberate disguise. The gloves likely ensured no fingerprints were left behind, while the scarf and bonnet could conceal hair color, distinguishing marks, or even her face. What seemed quirky at first now looked like a calculated effort to remain untraceable. That night, police canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors and showing Melissa's photograph, asking residents if they'd seen a woman with a toddler that morning. No one had. Detectives visited nearby shops, restaurants, and bus stops, questioning employees and drivers about a woman with a young child. The searches yielded nothing. Hospitals and clinics were alerted in case a child matching Melissa's description was brought in, but no report surfaced. Officers scoured nearby wooded areas, alleys, and ditches near the freeway, hoping to find any trace of Melissa's belongings, a diaper, a shoe, anything. There was no physical evidence. It was as if Melissa and the woman had evaporated into the scorching Texas air. By the second day, the situation grew dire, prompting the FBI to step in. They classified Melissa's disappearance as a likely kidnapping under the Federal Kidnapping Act, granting them jurisdiction in case she'd been taken across state lines. Wanted posters and missing child flyers bearing Melissa's cherubic face were distributed across Texas and into neighboring states. The Fort Worth Star-Telegram ran bold headlines. Fort Worth toddler missing. Television news aired segments showing Alta, heartbroken and tearful, pleading for her daughter's safe return. Despite the intense early efforts, the investigation hit a wall, constrained by the limitations of 1970s technology. There were no surveillance cameras, no internet to spread information instantly, no credit card trails to follow, no cell phones to track. The babysitter's phone calls, likely made from public payphones, left no traceable number or address. Every lead depended on human memory, which proved unreliable or non-existent. The trail grew colder by the hour. As standard procedure, police turned their attention to the family, questioning Alta and Jeffrey repeatedly about their relationships, acquaintances, or any motive someone might have to take Melissa. A custody dispute or personal vendetta was considered, but both parents were quickly cleared. Alta and Jeffrey, though separated, showed no signs of malice or involvement, only devastation. Their alibis were solid, and no evidence pointed to them. This was a stranger abduction, one of the rarest and most challenging cases to solve. The Fort Worth community rallied in those early days, organizing search parties that combed vacant lots, parks, and fields for any sign of the toddler. Volunteers walked shoulder to shoulder through tall grass, hoping to spot a clue, perhaps the tiny bow Melissa wore in her hair or a piece of her clothing. They found nothing. Local churches held prayer vigils, and families across the city locked their doors tighter, gripped by fear that a kidnapper could strike so brazenly. Yet no credible witnesses emerged. No one reported seeing a woman in a bonnet with distressed child or recalled anything suspicious from that morning. Police records from the time document the frustration. Every promising angle led to a dead end. By the end of the first week, the harsh reality set in. This kidnapper had executed her plan with chilling precision, leaving nothing for investigators to grasp. Inside the Fort Worth Police Department, seasoned detectives privately admitted they'd never encountered a case so devoid of evidence. A woman had walked into a family's life, taken a child, and vanished without leaving a single trace of herself. The simplicity and audacity of the crime were haunting. One detective noted in his report that the abduction was clearly premeditated, likely orchestrated by someone who had scoured classified ads for a vulnerable target, possibly even watched Alta's routine, and prepared a meticulous disguise and escape plan. In 1970, police lacked the technical tools to unravel such a calculated operation. For Alta, the days following Melissa's disappearance were a descent into agony. One moment, she was a hard-working mother juggling life's demands. The next, she was living a parent's worst nightmare. She quit her job temporarily to dedicate herself to the search, spending hours at police headquarters, answering endless questions, poring over maps with detectives, and compiling lists of anyone who might have a connection to the case. There was no one obvious. At home, she wandered her apartment, checking the same corners and closets repeatedly, as if Melissa might somehow reappear. Nights were unbearable, her mind replaying every detail of her interactions with Ruth Johnson. The ad's wording, the woman's soothing voice, the promises of a spacious yard and experienced care. Each memory felt like a trap she'd unwittingly stepped into. Guilt gnawed at her. Why hadn't she insisted on meeting Ruth in person? Why had she trusted a stranger? The what-ifs kept her awake, a torturous loop of self-blame. As summer faded into fall without a breakthrough, the Fort Worth police scaled back their active search. With no suspects, no crime scene, and no new leads, the case was transferred to the Missing Persons Bureau, a signal it was entering long-term limbo. Melissa's file joined countless others in a metal cabinet, awaiting a tip or evidence that might never come. By the end of 1970, the story of a missing Fort Worth toddler, once dominating front pages, slipped into the background. Newspapers moved on to fresh headlines, and Melissa's image, bright eyes, chubby cheeks, a tiny bow in her hair, faded from public view into collective memory. Yet the searing clarity of that tragedy remained etched in the minds of those who knew it. A scorching morning, a polite stranger in immaculate gloves, and a fleeting moment of trust that shattered a family's world. The woman in white gloves carrying Melissa away became an enduring symbol of how an ordinary day can turn catastrophic in an instant. She had stolen more than a child. She had robbed a family of their sense of safety, leaving behind decades of anguish and questions no one could answer. By late 1970, Melissa Highsmith's name was added to a growing national list of missing children. The early 1970s marked a rising awareness of child abductions, but investigative tools remained rudimentary. Melissa's case stood out for its utter lack of evidence, sparked by a mother's trust in a stranger who betrayed her in the most devastating way. As completely as a mysterious woman had appeared, she vanished, taking Alta's beloved daughter with her. When a child goes missing, every second counts. Police knew in August 1970 that if they didn't find a lead within 48 hours, their chances of recovering Melissa plummeted. Those critical hours passed without a trace, then a week, then a month. As summer turned to winter, the painful truth settled in. Melissa was gone, and no one knew if she'd ever be found. Days stretched into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. Before long, Melissa Highsmith's disappearance was no longer a fresh investigation. It was a cold case. Despite the initial surge of effort from Fort Worth police and the FBI, progress stalled almost immediately. There was no ransom demand, no evidence pointing to a family member or a strange spouse, common suspects in toddler abductions, and no signs of a broader kidnapping ring. The case's defining feature was its lack of any discernible pattern or clue. Investigators were left theorizing in a void. Early on, they concluded the kidnapping was premeditated, evidenced by the elaborate disguise and flawless execution, but without a suspect's real name or clear description beyond woman in gloves, they were chasing a phantom. Whoever took Melissa left no paper trail, no fingerprints, no witnesses. She was, for all intents, a ghost. Alta remained under scrutiny for some time, as is standard in missing child cases. Investigators probe her life, her estranged husband, and any possible motive someone close might have. But each interview only confirmed Alta as a grieving mother, not a suspect. There was no hidden plan, no insurance scheme, no vengeful ex. Alta's life became defined by waiting for police updates, enduring repetitive interrogations to ensure she wasn't hiding anything, and facing the unthinkable question, did you have something to do with it? No evidence ever implicated Alta, Jeffrey, or anyone in the Highsmith family. It was clearly the work of a random predator. Alta's torment was relentless. Each morning, she awoke to the deafening absence of her daughter. Each night, she clung to a cherished photo of baby Melissa by her bedside, tears blurring her vision as she relived the moments before her world collapsed. She recounted the chain of events like a tragic mantra. The classified ad, the friendly phone calls, the decision to trust a stranger. She agonized over missed warning signs. But Ruth's deception had been expertly crafted. The FBI maintained an open file, but without proof Melissa was taken across state lines. Their role was limited. They kept her details in the national database for missing persons. But by the mid-1970s, newer cases crowded out the old. The 1970s saw a surge in high-profile child abductions, and Melissa's case faded into a pre-digital backlog. Tips were rare and led nowhere. Yet the Highsmith family's search never wavered. Alta and Jeffrey, though no longer a couple, were forever linked by their loss. They moved forward with work, new relationships, and later children. But Melissa's fate was a constant undercurrent. Neither time nor life's changes could erase the pain of not knowing. In the late 1970s and 1980s, missing children gained national attention. Milk cartons began featuring their faces, and public service announcements raised awareness. The Highsmiths embraced every tool available, providing Melissa's photos to the newly formed National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC. The organization created age-progressed sketches, imagining Melissa as a grade schooler, a teenager, then a woman in her 20s. Alta and her family distributed these images widely, mailing pamphlets and sharing them with local media, which occasionally ran, "Have you seen this girl?" stories. Each new sketch prompted tips, but each led to disappointment. A woman in Oklahoma thought her neighbor resembled Melissa's latest sketch. The Highsmiths investigated, only to find no connection. A truck driver in New Mexico claimed he'd picked up a hitchhiker named Melissa in her 20s, sparking hope, but it was another dead end. Alta and Jeffrey drove hundreds of miles for every sighting, learning to temper hope with the cruel reality that most leads fizzled. By the 1990s, DNA testing emerged as a new tool, initially used for violent crimes or identifying remains. The Highsmiths asked if it could help, submitting their DNA to early databases. But these were rudimentary, focused on criminals, not missing persons. Each test returned the same result: negative. Alta refused to accept closure, insisting she needed proof before mourning Melissa as gone. Not knowing fueled her resolve. As the 1990s gave way to the 2000s, public interest in the decades-old case waned. Fort Worth police, overwhelmed with cold cases, one detective handled over 1,000, couldn't prioritize Melissa's file without new tips. But the internet offered a fresh avenue. In 2008, Melissa's younger siblings, raised in shadow of her absence, created a Finding Melissa Highsmith Facebook page. It became a digital archive, sharing baby photos, old news clippings, and age-progressed images. The page told a story of a stolen sister and a family's enduring hope, reaching a new audience in the growing online true crime community. Local residents discovered the case, advocacy groups connected, and armchair detectives on forums like Web Sleuths dissected details: the Ruth Johnson alias, the gloves, the lack of sightings. Theories range from an illegal adoption to a woman desperate for a child, but no answers materialized. Every few years, media revisited the case, often tied to a new sketch or milestone anniversary. Tips came from across the country, self-proclaimed Melissas with gaps in their past, or strangers spotting lookalikes. Each time, the Highsmiths approached with cautious hope, only to face DNA-confirmed disappointment. These cycles were emotionally draining, yet Alta steeled herself for every call or email, hoping it might be the one. Every time the phone rang, I thought, maybe this is it, she once said. And then it wasn't. Still, she couldn't give up. Her daughter was out there. By the late 2010s, genetic genealogy revolutionized cold cases, cracking mysteries like the Golden State Killer. The Highsmiths watched closely, wondering if DNA could find Melissa. In November 2021, a friend, an amateur genealogist, urged Jeffrey to try a consumer DNA test like 23andMe. Initially skeptical, Jeffrey saw it as a long shot, but ordered a kit. He spit into the tube, mailed it, and waited, tempering expectations. On November 22, 2021, an email from 23andMe changed everything. DNA match found, immediate family, parent-child. Jeffrey's heart raced. The match wasn't Melissa, but 3 individuals, likely grandchildren, indicating Melissa was alive and had children. With genealogist Lisa Jo Shell, they traced the matches to Melanie Walden, a Fort Worth woman in her early 50s, born in 1970, with no early records and a birthmark matching Melissa's. Jeffrey messaged Melanie, who was wary but saw uncanny resemblances in baby photos. A formal DNA test confirmed it. Melanie was Melissa. On Thanksgiving 2021, they reunited in Fort Worth, tears and hugs bridging 52 years. A church celebration drew cheers. Media hailed it a DNA miracle. Melissa learned her mother was her abductor, who died in 2022, claiming she bought Melissa for $500, a story Melissa doubted. In 2023, she reclaimed her name legally, healing with therapy and family. The Highsmiths turned their triumph into advocacy, their Facebook page a hub for others, inspiring over 90 families to find leads via DNA. Never give up, they urged, proving love and science can solve even the coldest cases. Like, comment, and subscribe to Cold Case Desk to join the